Most people tend to know about General Stormin Norman Schwarzkopf and his leadership during the Gulf War. However, his father, Major General Norman Schwarzkopf Sr., also had an interesting career and greatly impacted Iran in the 20th century. In 1917, when the United States entered World War I, Schwarzkopf received a commission as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Cavalry, where he was sent to Europe as part of the American Expeditionary Forces. And on the Western Front of the Great War, he was gassed with mustard gas, making him susceptible to respiratory illnesses for the rest of his life, for which he would receive also a Purple Heart. And during the occupation of Germany, he served as a provost marshal, partially because of his organizational skills and partially because of his fluency in German. When Schwarzkopf returned to the United States with the rank of colonel, he was appointed in 1921 by the governor of New Jersey to head the newly formed New Jersey State Police. He would personally train the first 25 state troopers and organize the state police into two troops, the first being a northern troop utilizing motorcycles to patrol mafia-controlled narcotics, whiskey, rum running, and gambling rings in the New York City area. And the second one, which was the southern troop, had troopers on horsebacks to crack down on moonshiners. Additionally, during his early years heading the state police, Schwarzkopf also held a commission as a major in the Army Reserves from January 10, 1924 until May 17 of 1926. And overlapping for a bit on April 6, 1926, he would be commissioned as a lieutenant colonel in the New Jersey National Guard, being assigned to the staff of the 44th Division. On the evening of March 1, 1932, Colonel Schwarzkopf, who was by now the first chief of the New Jersey State Police, was among one of the officials called to the residencies of Charles Lindbergh following the kidnapping of his 20-month-old son, Charlie. He arrived on the scene with his second-in-command, Major Charles Schofel, and established a police command post in a three-car garage on the side of Lindbergh's house, opposite to the nursery where the son was kidnapped. However, Schwarzkopf found it impossible to protect the area from contamination. However, the real issue with the case would be Lindbergh himself, as he was a control freak throughout the entire investigation and used his fame and influence to exert authority over matters, which meant that Schwarzkopf had essentially been forced to work around him, despite being in charge of the investigation. Additionally, Charles Lindbergh would refuse to allow Schwarzkopf to set up traps for the kidnappers or place a trace on phones after they started negotiating through an intermediary with the kidnappers. Basically, throughout the entire case, Schwarzkopf would do some pretty good and at times revolutionary police work, but Lindbergh wouldn't let too much come of it because, control freak. Anyway, it would turn out that his kidnapped infant son had died the day of the kidnapping, and Schwarzkopf would get the investigation done where the cops found the guy they deemed responsible in 1936. But that same year, Schwarzkopf would be dismissed due to clashes with the governor. He then returned to active duty with the 44th Division in September of 1940 and briefly commanded the 57th Infantry Brigade in 1941. During World War II, Schwarzkopf would be posted to Iran in 1942, where he was assigned to organize the Iranian National Police after the British-Soviet intervention that made Iran an Allied protectorate. His recruits were the gendarmes and were active in suppressing the Soviet-inspired attempts to destabilize the country, which were backing separatists in Azerbaijan and Mahabad. For his work in Iran, Schwarzkopf would be awarded the Distinguished Service Medal. After World War II and preventing mass Soviet destabilization efforts in Iran, he'd be promoted to Brigadier General in the late 1940s and was sent to the occupation of Germany once again to serve as Provost Marshal in the entire United States sector, which basically means the guy was in charge of all the MPs in the country. Shortly before retiring from the Army in 1953 with the rank of Major General, Schwarzkopf was sent by the CIA back to Iran as part of Operation Ajax to convince the self-exiled monarch Mohammad Reza Shah to return to power, where the Shah would remain until the Iranian Revolution. Schwarzkopf went so far as to organize the security forces he had trained to support the Shah, and in doing so he would also help to train what later became known as the Savak. He would retire in 1953 and die of lung cancer 5 years later in 1958. And that's the story of Norman Schwarzkopf Sr. What did you think? Who else do you want me to make a video about? Write in the comments, and thank you for watching.